What's up guys, Sharp here from gamecanon.co.uk, and I'm just here to give you a bit of a talk through of the 5.0.4 talents for the Shadow Priest from a PvP perspective, because that's my Shadow Priest. For me is purely my PvP character. Obviously apart from like leveling in the new expansion, I'll just be PvPing on him. I don't do any PvE because I don't enjoy it on my Priest. Like I say, I'm all about the PvP. So new talent system basically means you get a new talent point every 15 levels if you haven't already looked at these, which I imagine you will have by now. But the Shadow Priest ones, well, the Priest ones, because it's now the same for all three specs, you have the same choices of talents. So at 15, whether you're Holy, Discipline or Shadow, you pick between Void Tendrils, Scythe-Fiend and Dominate Mind. So looking at these from a purely Shadow PvP perspective, at 15, you have the choice between Void Tendrils, which summons shadowy tendrils out of the ground, and it's basically a root. It can root up to 5 enemies for 20 seconds, but if they kill the root, it's like a tentacle. If they kill that, then it cancels it. So it's easier for them to get out of than like a normal CC, because they can actually destroy the CC. But it's still pretty good, and 5 enemies, that's pretty impressive. Scythe-Fiend, this is the one that I'm using, and my particular favourite of this tier. Summons a Scythe-Fiend, which is like a little Void Walker thing. Stands in a place for 10 seconds, and casts Psychic Terror on a nearby enemy within 20 yards every 1.5 seconds. So you're talking about 6, maybe 7 fears. Probably more like 6 though. 6 fears out of that, which is pretty awesome, especially if there's a big group of enemies ahead of you. You whack that down in the middle of them, and it's going to fear them all one after the other. And if even if it's not particularly effective at actually keeping them feared because they trinket out of it, it makes them use their trinket, so that then you get in there with your Psychic Scream or your or Psychic Horror, and you've got them feared and they can't get out of it then. Dominate Mind is mind control, mind up to level 88 it says there. I don't know if that changes with your level. I don't know if it's 3 levels higher than you are, but I'm not particularly, I've never been much for mind controlling. I think mind control is more of a bit of fun than something that's particularly useful in PvP. You may disagree with me, but I've never found it particularly useful, so that one for me is the worst one. I think it's between Scythe-Fiend and Void Tendrils, and for me it's got to be Scythe-Fiend. Although I've heard people have a lot of fun with Void Tendrils, like rooting a warrior and then standing like just out of their melee range, but just inside their charge range, so they can't do shit to you, but you are just like melting their face off. Body and level 30 talents. You've got choice between, I think this one's an easy one to pick. Body and Soul, which is basically the movement speed increase for Power Word Shield that used to be in the Holy Tree. Angelic Feather, which places a feather that if allies walk through it, they gain 60% increased movement speed. I imagine that could be quite good situationally in raids, but for PvP, I don't see that it has a lot of application. I mean, increased movement speed is good, but having it be a static thing that they have to run through, I'm not sure how useful that'll be. And then the biggie for me, the one that is stands out as the best choice for PvP, is Phantasm. So that when you fade, you remove all movement impairing effects from yourself, which is like a mini trinket. It's not going to get rid of polymorph or fear, but it stops you from being slowed. You're untargetable by ranged attacks, and your movement speed is unhindered for 3 seconds. So, say you're fighting against a warrior, a hunter. He whacks a concussive shot on you. You hit this, you are unhindered. The concussive shot has no effect, and also he can't target you with ranged attacks for 3 seconds. That's a 3-second window where you just have free reign to DPS him or control him in some way with a fear, or you've got 3 seconds of no damage, which is great against range classes. So now moving on to the 45 talents. We have From Darkness Comes Light. So for Shadow, this means that Vampiric Touch damage has a 15% chance to cause Mind Spike to not consume your dots, become instant cast, cost no mana, and deal 50% additional damage, and that can charge twice by the looks of it. So what you're looking at there is basically a double damage Mind Spike if you get 2 charges, that's free and instant, which is nice. It's a nice bit of burst damage, but you do only have a 15% chance to do that, so it's difficult to account for that. It's something a little random. And over long fights, such as PvE fights, that may edge out the other ones, but like I say, I'm not particularly sure of that for PvP, just because you can't rely on it. Mindbender is an improved Shadow Fiend that does more damage. I'm not, like, Shadow Fiend's cool to just like throw it out there in PvP, and it is extra damage and it's like a hindrance to them, but it's not one of my main PvP tools, so I decided not to go for Mindbender. I went for this, Power Word Solace, which as Shadow is Shadow Word Insanity. Now Shadow Word Insanity gives you a great deal of extra burst damage. When your Shadow Word Pain has less than, in my case, 5.4 seconds remaining. I think that was different before, and therefore I think it might be affected by haste. When it has less than a certain amount of seconds remaining, you hit that and it does 20k damage basically at the minute for me. Obviously that's going to scale. So that's a great way to, like, just, you know, as your Shadow Word Pain's coming to an end, you just get a big spike of damage at the end. So if you can sort of try and coincide that with, you know, like your Shadow Word Pain ending around the kind of time that you're going to be finishing off a player, and you get a Mind Blast, an instant Mind Blast proc at the same time, you can hit that 20k, hit your Mind Blast 20k, and then you've got double Shadow Word Death if they're below 20%, because obviously if the target doesn't die, Shadow Word Death refreshes. So, you know, you're going bam, Insanity, bam, Mind Blast, bam, bam, 2 Shadow Word Deaths. That's going to finish off most people, you know, that's a good burst to get that kill. So I went with Shadow Word Insanity, and I've had a lot of fun with that so far. It's a great talent. So the next one is more of a, I mean, each tier, you'll notice, has got like a general feel to it. This is a crowd control tier, body and so. This one is like a movement speed tier. This one is an increased burst damage tier. This one is survivability. So Desperate Prayer instantly heals you for 30% of your total health. That's, you know, been in the game since Classic. It is a classic. It's a great skill, but it does take you out of shadow form, or at least it did. I don't know if it still does actually, because I've not used it. But yeah, it's okay. It's a 30% heal. That one's a strange one. I've not used that yet. It blows you into the darkness, leaving your true form behind. As a shadow, you stealth but remain in combat, and it lasts 6 seconds or until your true form is hit by 3 attacks. So I assume basically you move away, and then when they've hit you 3 times, you reappear, which is useful as an escape mechanism. And I may actually start using this one. It's a tight one between these two for me, so I'm going to give Spectral Guise a go. But at the moment, I'm using Angelic Bulwark. Anytime a damaging attack brings you below 30% health, you gain an absorption shield equal to 20% of your total health. So you basically get a 20% damage shield. It can't happen more than once every 90 seconds, so it's only going to happen once in a fight. Well, you know, in an average duel with someone. Could happen a couple of times in an arena. I think that's particularly useful because, you know, when you've got things bringing you below 30% health, that's when you kind of need, that's when the shit's hitting the fan and you need that bit of extra help. Next tier, this one is a, let's have a look. So this is another damaging one. After damaging or healing a target below 20% health, you deal 15% increased damage and healing for 10 seconds. That's Twist of Fate. That's good for if you're healing. It's good for, you know, bringing people up from low health. For DPSing, it's good for getting the finishing blows. It gives you that bit of increased damage. Power Infusion is Power Infusion, it's the same as it's always been. Increase spellcasting speed by 20% for 20 seconds and reduces mana cost. So again, that's a good bit of burst damage. If you sort of, I think it's better for discipline really when you're smiting and things like that. With Shadow, a lot of your spells are instant cast, so it has less use there. Divine Insight, this is the one I'm using, as you can see. For Shadow, periodic damage from Shadow Word Pain has a 5% chance to reset the cooldown on Mind Blast and cause your next Mind Blast to be instant cast. This one is the one I was talking about before when I was talking about like lining up a finisher, is that when this procs, you have 12 seconds in which your next Mind Blast is instant. So if you can get them down to, you know, a relatively sort of below 40% health, and then you're hitting your Insanity, your instant Mind Blast from Divine Insight, and then a double Shadow Word Death, that's a great little finishing combo. And then there's the level 90 talents. I don't know, I assume that these are final. This is how they're going to be when MOP comes out next week. But, you know, obviously I've not had a chance to use any of these yet. These are basically AoE, all three of them. But they work in different ways. Cascade is a smart damage and heal, depending on what you are doing. So if you launch it at it basically launches it at a Holy Bolt at the target, or a Shadow Bolt if you're Shadow. Then that splits into 2 bolts when it hits that target, and hits 2 more targets, and then they split into 2 targets, and then they split into 2 targets. It bounces 3 times. So in total you can hit up to 15 people with this. You know, if you did 2, then 1, then 2 for the first bounce, so that's 3, and then 4 for the second bounce, so that's 7, and then the next bounce will be 8, so it's 15. So it can hit 15 people. It says that it causes up to about 16k damage. So you can do 16k damage to 15 people, which is a ton of damage, but it is spread out over people, and, you know, it's very unlikely in a battleground or in any real PvP scenario that you're ever going to see 15 people together, unless you're in AV. So it's never going to really fulfill its potential in that scenario. But it's pretty cool, and it's a great little smart damage and smart heal, because it's just going to bounce between the people that are around. Divine Star, this is basically like a path of damage in front of you. The star fires in front of you, travels 24 yards, and causes 5.3k damage to all enemies within its path, and heals all allies within its path, within 6 yards of its path. So it's like a 12 yard across beam that travels 24 yards, and it heals all the allies and damages all the enemies. That could be very useful in PvP, and then it comes back as well. So it effectively does it twice to everything in its path, depending on when people move and stuff. I imagine it could also be quite easily avoidable, depending how quickly it moves. But it's certainly something that could be very useful. Halo creates a ring that quickly expands and grows in power. So it basically it's like a pulse out from you, and the further away the enemy or the ally are, the more damage or healing they take from it, with its greatest effect being at 25 yards. And it does up to 53,000 healing and up to 32k damage. That's going to go up when when you get to like level 90. So that's a huge amount of damage and a huge amount of healing. You know, it has a 40-second cooldown, which is longer than the others, but to me, I think that's the best one, because you just run into a big group of your allies fighting with their enemies in a battleground, and you hit Halo. It's just gonna pulse out and change. It's gonna change the tide of the fight. You know, all your guys get 50k extra health, and all their guys take 50k damage, 30k damage. You know, obviously that's going to be scaled down with PvP, but that could be a game changer. So I think I'll be running with Halo to start with, maybe Cascade, because it's a smart one, but I don't think it's going to fulfill its potential. And it'll be interesting to see how fast Divine Star moves, to see if that's one that's feasible. But I'm going to run with Halo to start with. So that's just a brief overview of the talents in 5.0.4 for a Shadow Priest PvPer. Obviously, talents are a lot easier to move around now with the Dust of Disappearance, so I would suggest that, I mean, by all means listen to what I've said and take some of it on board, but the best way to find the playstyle that you like is to experiment and to play with the different abilities, because it's easy to move them around now with Dust, and they're very situational, and there's a lot of choice there now rather than it just being a cookie cutter build. I'm going to go through glyphs quickly just because, well, the glyphs that I have, I'm not going to go through all the glyphs. I might go through all the glyphs at a later date just to, do an overview of them all. But what I have Fade, because it reduces all damage taken by 10%, making Fade even more useful. It becomes like a really good little mitigation escape talent, because a great thing about Shadow Priest is their ability to just survive. Like, a friend of mine that I was dueling with the other day was like, just, why won't you die? Because I can just like disperse, fade, shield, renew. I mean, now with this glyph that I use, Glyph of Dark Binding, you can use Prayer of Mending, Renew, and Leap of Faith without cancelling Shadow Form, which is hugely useful. You can just keep a Renew on yourself all the time, so you're constantly renewing your health, and a Prayer of Mending on yourself at all time. I noticed recently that Flash Heal is now a lot more effective, even for Shadow Priests. So you can heal, you can get away and heal yourself up and not be like dead out of mana like you used to be. So we are hugely powerful now in terms of surviving. And then I went for Mind Blast, because if Mind Blast crits, cause the target to be unable to move for 4 seconds. So that's basically like another crowd control, another route occasionally. You can't rely on it for that, but it could be very useful if it procced at great time. Miners now are really that. They don't really affect much at all. So I've just got Shadow Ravens instead of Shadow Orbs, Dark Archangel, and Shadow to make my Shadow form a little bit less dark and transparent. As you can see, I can actually see my character. Oh no, wait, I'm not in Shadow form. Yeah, when I'm in Shadow form, I can actually see my character a little better. Looks a bit better, I think. So, like, they're just cosmetic. But, those are the biggies, I think. Fade, Mind Blast, Glyph of Dark Binding are the ones I'm going for, but I've got to experiment with the rest. That's the way it is now. You just got to experiment with them, because there's no easy choice. So thanks for watching this, and I hope it's helped you guys, and I'll be bringing you some Shadow PvP play soon. Thanks very much, and goodbye.